He is a leprous man. He is unclean. The priest shall pronounce him utterly unclean. His plague is in his head. And the leper in whom the plague is, his clothes shall be rent, and his head bare, and he shall put a covering upon his upper lip, and shall cry, Unclean, unclean. Leviticus chapter 13, verses 44 through 45. Throughout history, no disease has provoked more fear, contempt, and horror than that of leprosy. It is one of the oldest and most stigmatized ailments known to man. Though now known to be a curable infectious disease, it was once thought to be a curse, a punishment from God, forsaken by their families and labeled as outcasts. Its victims have been condemned to a life of decay, suffering, and isolation. Even today, lepers in some parts of the world are still shunned and forced to live in isolated communities. Now follow us into the past as we attempt to understand one of the most feared diseases of all time. Leprosy is a chronic infectious disease affecting the upper respiratory tract. Symptoms include skin lesions, nerve damage, and loss of sensation in the limbs. Despite common misconceptions, leprosy usually does not cause body parts to fall off. Instead, it causes progressive decay of the nerves, which prevents the body from properly caring for the affected area, resulting in the death of the respective extremity. The earliest recorded account of leprosy was in the Egyptian Ebers Papyrus, a medical document written around 1550 BC. Later, around 600 BC, the Indian text Sushruta Samhita recommended treating leprosy, or kushta, with oil from the chalmugra tree. It was not until Alexander the Great and his troops returned to Greece from India in 326 BC that the disease spread to Europe. The Bible provides perhaps the most expansive early record of leprosy. While the Old Testament calls upon unclean lepers to live alone, the New Testament includes parables in which the prophet Jesus heals and interacts with victims of the disease. During the Middle Ages, leprosy achieved its greatest height and, with it, its most devastating social stigmas. Lepers were banned from public buildings, prohibited from speaking to children, and required to ring a bell in the streets. To find the telltale scab of leprosy was to receive a death sentence from God. Signor Angelo de Lusa, a happy, wealthy Italian man who lived in Genoa in 1353, was one such victim.
My face!
Signor de Lusa, a man who had sinned only as much as any other man, found the mark of a ghastly curse upon his face. Concealment would be necessary, or he would risk losing all those close to him.
Angelo, darling, what's that on your face?
Oh, it's nothing.
Angela? You're a monster! Come, Christina, your father's not safe anymore.
No!
Alas, those who were diseased never hid the symptoms for long. The infected's family, terrified, would often abandon their loved one. It was from this fear that leper colonies began cropping up throughout Europe and India, located on islands or in remote locations, or sometimes even on main roads. These institutions were designed for quarantine. The colonies were hardly perfect. Populated by those who rotted away, perhaps this, more than the pain, was what lepers dreaded most.
Greetings, Wanderer. My name is Giovanni Capelli.
And my name is Bianca Baldelli.
I've heard this is a place for people like me.
You are welcome in our humble colony.
I'd be glad to join you.
No one was safe.
Bella, Christina, I've missed you so.
I've missed you too, Angela.
Your face, it's...
Scarred.
but it's still beautiful to me.
Thank you, Angela.
Those who shunned their infected family members and friends always carried that chance of becoming one of those they had feared. The disease, despite all efforts, was unavoidable. There was nowhere to run and nowhere to hide. In 1873, a Norwegian physician made a discovery that forever changed the face of leprosy. While studying the disease, G.H. Armwire Hansen identified the microorganism Microbacterium leprae, that is responsible for the infection. This was the first microbacterium to be identified as causing disease in man. Although the bacterium cannot be cultured in a laboratory, scientists have expanded on Hansen's work to gain a thorough understanding of leprosy. We now know that 95% of the population is naturally immune to leprosy. Leprosy also has a remarkably long incubation period, which makes it difficult to identify when and where the disease was contracted. Although the mode of transmission of the disease is still unknown, most scientists think that Mycobacterium leprae is spread from person to person through close contact or in the respiratory droplets. In the 1940s, the drug dapsone was developed to treat leprosy. However, the bacterium quickly became resistant to dapsone and the treatment became useless. This led to a search for more effective drugs that could combat leprosy. In 1981, Indian scientist Shantram Yawalkar proposed a combined therapy of dapsone, glufazamine, and rifampicin. These 3 anti-leprosy drugs are still used to treat the disease today. At present, there are an estimated 2 to 3 million people worldwide who suffer from the disease. Since Hansen's discovery, the term leper has gradually become more offensive. The new, more politically correct name is someone with Hansen's disease. Although quarantine is no longer necessary, leper colonies still exist in India, Japan, Vietnam, and Hawaii. While the prejudices surrounding leprosy still remain, new treatments have changed this curse from God into a simple bacterium. Life can continue for the infected. The curse has been lifted.